The warning lights in the Galactic Council chamber turned from blue to deep red. Every ambassador in the Great Hall stopped talking at once. Something had just entered the Kepler 442 combat zone, and the sensors were screaming. Ambassador Veltok's 4 eyes widened as he read the data on his screen. His thin gray fingers shook slightly. "This cannot be correct," he whispered to his aide. "The humans sent only one ship?" For 3 months, the Thrakari Empire had been destroying everything in the Kepler 442 system. They had brought 200 warships, each one a masterpiece of destruction. The Alliance had sent their best fleets to stop them. 50 proud vessels now floated as cold metal tombs in space. The lucky ones had managed to retreat. Most hadn't been lucky, and now the humans had arrived, one ship. The UNS Perseverance. Veltok had seen human vessels before during his time at the trade stations. They were ugly things, all function and no beauty. Where other species built smooth, elegant ships that looked like they could slice through space itself, humans built flying boxes. They welded extra pieces wherever they needed them. They ran cables along the outside of hulls. They patched holes with whatever metal they could find. Everyone knew humans were insane traders who held their ships together with something they called duct tape and hope. The main viewing screen flickered to life. The human ship appeared, and several ambassadors actually laughed. The Perseverance was only 400 meters long. The Thrakari dreadnoughts were 4,000 meters each. It looked like a child's toy floating toward a pack of monsters. On board the Thrakari command ship, Commander Krexval sat in his throne-like captain's chair. His scales, each one as hard as steel, rippled with amusement. His forearms moved over different control panels as he studied the human vessel. "Sir," his tactical officer said, all 3 of his mouths speaking in harmony, "the human ship is not responding to our demands to leave." "Of course not," Krexval rumbled. His voice sounded like grinding stone. "The Deathworlders think they're brave." How amusing. He had heard of humans. They came from a world where everything tried to kill everything else. They breathed poison oxygen. They leaked water from their skin when hot. They walked on only 2 legs like they were constantly about to fall over. And somehow they had reached the stars. "Should we destroy them immediately?" the tactical officer asked. "No," Krexval said, leaning back. "Let them come closer. I want them to see what they face. I want them to understand their mistake before they die." The Perseverance moved forward at a steady pace. It didn't speed up or slow down. It just kept coming, like it was on a morning cruise rather than entering a battlefield. The debris of destroyed Alliance ships floated past it. A broken battlecruiser, split perfectly in half, drifted by the human vessel. The Perseverance didn't change course. Inside the human ship, Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge. She was shorter than most of her crew, with black hair tied back in a simple ponytail. Her uniform wasn't fancy. It was dark blue, practical, with pockets everywhere. She watched the main screen with dark brown eyes that didn't blink. "Captain," her communications officer said, "we're receiving multiple signals. The Thrakari are demanding we leave. The Alliance is begging us to retreat. The Galactic Council is asking if we're insane." "Ignore them all," Chen said. Her voice was calm, like she was ordering coffee rather than flying into certain death. "Lieutenant Torres, time check." 58 minutes until we reach optimal position, Captain." "Good, open a channel." "All frequencies." The communications officer nodded. "Channel open." Chen stepped forward slightly. When she spoke, her voice carried across every receiver in the system. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the UNS Perseverance. We are here to establish a humanitarian corridor for civilian evacuation. You have 1 hour to comply. Any vessel attempting to prevent civilian evacuation will be considered hostile. This is your only warning." The bridge was silent for a moment after she finished. Then the Thrakari response came through. It was laughter. Deep rolling laughter from hundreds of Thrakari voices. Back in the council chambers, Ambassador Veltok put his head in all 4 of his hands. "They've killed themselves," he muttered. "The humans have gone completely mad." His aide touched his shoulder gently. "Sir, should we say words for them?" "Some species do that when others are about to die." "Not yet," Veltok said, looking back at the screen. "Something feels wrong about this. The humans are crazy, yes, but they're not stupid. They turned their planet's own moon into a mining operation. They live in cities under their oceans. They jump out of flying vehicles for fun, but they're not stupid." On the Thrakari command ship, Krexval had stopped laughing. The human's message confused him. Humanitarian corridor? The humans thought they could make demands. With one tiny ship? "Sir," His weapons officer called out. The human vessel is now within optimal firing range. Fire everything, Krexval ordered. Every missile we have. Turn that ugly little box into atoms. 200 Thrakari ships turned their weapons toward the single human vessel. Missile tubes opened like hungry mouths. In seconds, over 10,000 missiles launched. They were beautiful in a terrible way. Each one glowing with purple energy, each one capable of cracking a moon in half. They streaked through space like angry hornets, all aimed at one target. The Perseverance didn't try to run. It didn't even move faster. It just kept going forward. Captain, the tactical officer on the human ship said, 10,000 plus incoming. Impact in 30 seconds. Understood, Chen said. She picked up her coffee mug from the armrest of her chair and took a sip. All hands, brace for turbulence. It might get bumpy. The Alliance observers watched their screens in horror. The missiles were close enough now to see with bare eyes, a cloud of death surrounding the human ship. 20 seconds. 10 seconds, 5. And then something impossible happened. The space around the Perseverance suddenly filled with metal. Millions and millions of tiny tungsten pellets, each one no bigger than a marble, erupted from ports all over the human ship. They spread out in a perfect sphere, moving at speeds that shouldn't be possible. The missiles hit this cloud and simply disappeared. They shattered into nothing, their explosions lighting up space like fireworks. But the humans weren't using energy shields like every other advanced species. They were using chunks of metal, simple, stupid, impossible chunks of metal, fired so fast and in such numbers that nothing could get through. When the explosions cleared, the Perseverance was still there. Its hull was scorched in places. A few antennas were bent, but it was still there, still moving forward. Impossible, Krexval breathed. His scales had gone pale. That's impossible. They don't even have shields. Captain Chen put down her coffee mug. It was still half full. Lieutenant Torres, time check. 43 minutes remaining, Captain. Good, maintain course. She turned to her weapons officer. Mr. Kim, prepare boarding countermeasures. They'll try to board us next. They always do when the missiles don't work. Already done, Captain. The welcome party is ready. In the council chambers, Ambassador Veltok stood up slowly. His aide was saying something, but he couldn't hear it. He was too busy staring at the screen, at the small human ship that had just survived an attack that would have destroyed a fleet. What are they? Someone whispered behind him. Veltok didn't answer. He didn't know what the humans were. But he was starting to think the galaxy was about to find out. The Perseverance continued forward, unhurried, unstoppable. The stars watched in silence. Commander Krexval stared at the tactical display. The human ship was still there, still moving forward like nothing had happened. 10,000 missiles, and the humans had stopped them all with primitive kinetic weapons. His weapons officer was running calculations, trying to understand what they had just seen. Sir, the officer said, his voice shaking. They fired over 3 million projectiles in less than 2 seconds. The energy requirements alone should have drained their entire power core. Then how? Krexval demanded. They're not using energy weapons, sir. It's all chemical propulsion and magnetic acceleration. Old technology. Ancient technology. Technology we abandoned 5,000 years ago because it was too primitive. Krexval's 4 fists slammed onto his armrests. Send the boarding pods. If we can't destroy them from outside, we'll take them from within. Send 500 of our best warriors. The boarding pods launched like seeds from a dying flower. Each one carried 10 Thrakari warriors in full combat armor. The Thrakari were the terror of the galaxy for good reason. 3 meters tall, 4 arms, scales that could stop most energy weapons, and a warrior culture that had conquered 50 systems. They had never lost a boarding action. On the Perseverance, Captain Chen watched the pods approaching. Mr. Kim, our guests are about to arrive. Welcome mat is ready, Captain, Kim replied. His fingers danced over his console. Sections 7 through 15 are prepared. Good. Remember, we offered them a chance to comply. Chen picked up her coffee and took another sip. Make sure the gravity generators are working properly. We don't want our guests to be too comfortable. The first boarding pod hit the human ship with a metallic clang that echoed through the hull. Cutting torches immediately went to work, carving through the outer armor. It took longer than expected. The human ship's hull was thicker than any warship the Thrakari had ever seen. 2 meters of solid metal and ceramic composite, layered like the scales of some ancient beast. Finally, the first hole opened. Warrior leader Thexanil led his squad through the breach, weapons raised, ready for the defenders to meet them. But the corridor was empty and dark, and there was no air. No atmosphere, one of his warriors reported. They've depressurized this entire section. Cowards, Thexanil snarled through his helmet communicator. They think lack of air will stop us? We have fought in the void itself. They moved forward in perfect formation, magnetic boots clicking on the metal floor. The corridor was ugly, all exposed pipes and cables with warning signs in multiple languages. Everything looked like it had been repaired a dozen times. Weld marks everywhere, patches on top of patches. Then the gravity changed. One moment, Thexanil was walking on the floor. The next, he was falling toward what had been the ceiling. He slammed into it hard, his armor taking most of the impact. Before he could recover, the gravity shifted again. Now he was falling sideways, tumbling into a wall. What is happening? One of his warriors screamed. The gravity kept changing. Random directions, random strength. Sometimes none at all, leaving them floating. Sometimes 3 times normal, crushing them against whatever surface they hit. The Thrakari warriors, trained for decades in combat, were reduced to bouncing around the corridor like toys. Then the humans appeared. They came through hidden panels in the walls, wearing thick armor that looked like it had been assembled from tank parts. They moved easily in the chaotic gravity using handholds and magnetic boots, clearly used to this insanity, and they carried weapons that shouldn't exist on a spacecraft. Chemical propellant firearms, guns that used exploding powder to fire metal bullets, weapons so primitive that no civilized species had used them in space combat for millennia. Because energy weapons were cleaner, more efficient, more elegant. But energy weapons needed atmosphere to create plasma blooms. They needed stable conditions to maintain beam cohesion. They were affected by gravity fluctuations. Bullets didn't care about any of that. The first Thrakari warrior took 3 rounds to the chest. His armor, designed to disperse energy weapons, did nothing against simple kinetic impact. The bullets punched through like his scales were paper. He died confused, not understanding how such primitive weapons could hurt him. The humans didn't fight like any species the Thrakari had encountered. They didn't stand in formation. They didn't announce themselves. They came from above, below, from ventilation shafts, from behind panels. They used the changing gravity like a weapon itself, timing their attacks for when the Thrakari were most disoriented. And they didn't fight with honor. They fought to win. One human soldier, later identified as Corporal Martinez, actually rode a Thrakari warrior like a mount when the gravity went to 0, using a combat knife to find the gaps in the alien's armor. Another, Private Johnson, had modified his rifle to fire explosive rounds that turned the corridor into a storm of shrapnel. In the council chambers, the observers watched the helmet footage from the Thrakari warriors in shocked silence. This wasn't combat. This was chaos. This was insanity. They've turned their own ship into a weapon, someone whispered. Back on the Perseverance, Sergeant Williams led her squad through maintenance tunnel B7. The Thrakari had broken through into the main corridor above them. She could hear them on her helmet sensors, confused and angry. Remember, she said to her squad, we're not trying to be heroes. We're trying to win. Thompson, you got those gas canisters ready? Ready, Sarge, though I still think it's mean. Mean wins fights. On my mark. They opened the maintenance hatch just a crack. The gas canisters rolled out, hissing as they released their contents. There wasn't poison gas. The Geneva Convention, even the space version humanity had signed, forbade that. It was pepper spray. Industrial strength concentrated pepper spray. The Thrakari warriors' helmets protected them from vacuum. They didn't protect them from chemical irritants that stuck to their visors, making it impossible to see. The warriors stumbled around, blind and confused, while Williams and her squad picked them off with precise shots. Within 20 minutes, all 500 Thrakari warriors were dead or retreating to their pods. The humans had lost 12 soldiers. The Thrakari had never taken the ship's bridge. They had never even left the outer corridors that the humans had deliberately prepared for them. Commander Krexval watched the surviving boarding pods return. Less than 100 warriors had made it back, many of them wounded, all of them traumatized. They're insane, one warrior gasped over the comm. They fight without honor, without rules. They use their own ship as a trap. The gravity changes. The air is poison. They come from nowhere. They don't fight. They hunt, Captain Chen opened another channel to the Thrakari fleet. That was your boarding attempt. You have 35 minutes to comply with our request for a humanitarian corridor. I will not warn you again. Captain, her communications officer said, we're receiving a message from the Alliance. They're asking what we are. Chen smiled slightly. Tell them we're human. That should be answer enough. In his throne-like chair, Krexaval's scales had gone from pale to almost white. His forehands gripped his armrests so tight they were leaving marks in the metal. What are they? His tactical officer asked. Their technology is ancient. Their ship is ugly. Their weapons are primitive, but they just defeated our best warriors like they were children. Krexval didn't answer immediately. He was thinking about the human captain's voice. Calm, controlled, like she had expected everything that had happened, like she had planned for it. Sir, his weapons officer called out. Should we attack again? Yes, Krexval snarled. Bring my dreadnought to bear. We'll crush them with superior firepower. They can't stop a direct assault from a ship 50 times their size. The massive Thrakari dreadnought began to turn, its weapons powering up. Energy crackled along its 4-kilometer length. This was the ship that had broken the Alliance fleet. This was the pride of the Thrakari Empire. On the Perseverance, Captain Chen put down her empty coffee mug. They're bringing in the big one. Captain, her tactical officer reported. I see it, Chen said. Mr. Kim, prepare the special packages. All hands, acceleration couches. Things are about to get interesting. The human crew strapped themselves into their acceleration couches. Thick padding surrounded their bodies. IV lines connected to their suits. And then they began filling with fluid. Blue, oxygen-rich fluid that filled their lungs, their stomachs, every cavity in their bodies. Because humans were about to do something that no other species could survive. They were about to break the laws of physics, or at least the laws as the galaxy understood them. The Thrakari dreadnought was beautiful in the way that dangerous things often are. 4 kilometers of polished black metal, with weapon arrays that looked like the spines of some cosmic beast. It turned slowly, majestically, bringing its main guns to bear on the tiny human ship. In the council chambers, Ambassador Veltok's aide grabbed his arm. Sir, we should leave. If that dreadnought fires its main weapon, the explosion could damage ships even at safe distances. No, Veltok said quietly. I need to see this. See what? The humans die. Maybe. Or maybe we'll see why the humans survived on a world where everything wanted to kill them. Commander Krexval stood from his throne. Main guns to full power. Target the human vessel's center mass. I want nothing left but atoms. The dreadnought's main gun was a marvel of Thrakari engineering. It fired a contained antimatter beam wrapped in exotic particles. It had cracked moons. It had torn space stations in half. The energy building up in its focusing arrays made nearby space ripple. On the Perseverance, every human was now floating in fluid-filled suits. They looked like they were drowning, but they were breathing the oxygenated liquid. It was uncomfortable. It was unnatural. It was something humanity had developed for one reason: to survive accelerations that would turn normal bodies into paste. Captain Chen floated in her command couch, speaking through the fluid in her lungs. Her voice came out distorted but clear through the electronic systems. All hands prepare for combat acceleration. Mr. Torres, plot an intercept course. Captain, Torres replied, his voice also warped by the fluid. That will require 15G acceleration. I'm aware, execute. The human ship's engines came alive. Not elegant antimatter drives or exotic matter manipulators. Human engines were fusion torches, raw stellar fury barely contained by magnetic fields and hope. They burned like small stars, and the Perseverance leaped forward. 15 times Earth's gravity slammed into the ship. Any normal creature would have been crushed instantly, organs flattened, bones shattered. But the humans floated in their fluid cocoons, the liquid supporting them equally from all directions. They were uncomfortable. They were in pain, but they were alive. The Thrakari weapons officer watched his screen in confusion. Sir, the human ship is accelerating at impossible speeds. No biological creature can survive that. They're committing suicide, Krexval said. A ramming attack. Fire now. The dreadnought's main gun discharged. A beam of pure destruction lanced across space, bright enough to blind anyone who looked directly at it. It was perfectly aimed. It should have vaporized the human ship, but the Perseverance wasn't where it was supposed to be. At 15 gravities of acceleration, it had moved just enough. The beam passed through empty space where the human ship had been a second before. Impossible, Krexval roared. Fire again! All weapons! The dreadnought erupted with energy beams, plasma bolts, and particle streams. Space itself seemed to burn. Any one of those shots could destroy a normal vessel. But normal vessels couldn't accelerate like the Perseverance was now doing. It danced through the fire, always where the targeting computers didn't expect it to be. And then the humans fired back. The first weapon was something the galaxy hadn't seen in 10,000 years. A nuclear-pumped X-ray laser. A small nuclear bomb detonated inside a specially designed chamber on the Perseverance's hull. Its energy focused into a beam of coherent X-rays that struck the dreadnought's shields like a hammer. The shields, designed to stop particle beams and plasma, flickered under the assault of pure radiation. The second weapon was even simpler. A railgun. 2 magnetic rails accelerating a tungsten rod to 20% of light speed. It punched through the weakened shields and hit the dreadnought's hull, boring a hole 50 meters deep. Damage report, Krexval demanded. Hull breach in Sector 7. Shields at 60%. Sir, they're weapons. They're not using any technology we recognize. It's all ancient designs, but pushed to extremes we never imagined. Captain Chen's distorted voice came through the fluid. Deploy the swarm. From the Perseverance's hull, 10,000 small objects launched. Each one was no bigger than a basketball, covered in solar panels and tiny thruster ports. They spread out like a cloud of insects moving in seemingly random patterns. The Thrakkery tactical officer laughed. Mines, they think mines will work? Our point defense will destroy them in seconds. The dreadnought's defensive weapons came online. Hundreds of small lasers tracking and firing at the approaching objects. They destroyed dozens, then hundreds. But the mines weren't trying to reach the dreadnought. As they were destroyed, they released clouds of something. Sir, the science officer said, voice tight with fear, those aren't normal mines. They're releasing some kind of replicating nanomachine. The debris from the destroyed mines is assembling into more mines. For every mine destroyed, 2 more appeared from the cloud of nanomachines. Then 4, then 8. The cloud grew exponentially, a gray swarm that began to blot out the stars. That's illegal, Krexval shouted. Self-replicating weapons are banned by every civilized species. On the Perseverance, Lieutenant Kim managed to laugh through the fluid in his lungs. Good thing we never claimed to be civilized. The swarm reached the dreadnought. The tiny machines didn't explode. They just landed on the hull and started eating. They converted the dreadnought's own armor into more of themselves, spreading like a metallic plague across the beautiful ship's surface. Get them off. Get them off! Krexval screamed. His crew tried everything. Energy weapons just fed the nanomachine's power. Kinetic weapons spread them further. The dreadnought's hull began to dissolve in patches, atmosphere venting from 1,000 tiny holes. And still the Perseverance came on, accelerating at 15 gravities, firing weapon after weapon. Nuclear-pumped lasers, railgun rounds, clouds of smart mines, even simple tungsten pellets fired at relativistic speeds. In the council chambers, the observers watched in stunned silence. The mighty Thrakkery dreadnought, pride of an empire, was being taken apart by a ship 1/50th its size. How? Someone whispered. How are the humans surviving those accelerations? How are their weapons working? Nothing they're using should work this well. Ambassador Veltok understood. They're not using advanced technology. They're using simple technology pushed beyond all safe limits. Look at their engine signature. Those aren't clean antimatter reactions. That's barely controlled fusion. They're riding controlled explosions. Their weapons aren't elegant. They're just physics pushed to extremes. But the acceleration? They're breathing fluid, Veltok said, his 4 eyes wide with realization. They're drowning themselves to survive. They turned their own bodies into something that can survive impossible forces. No other species would even think of that. It's insane the dreadnought was dying. Its beautiful hull was pocked with holes from railgun impacts, burned from laser strikes and being eaten away by the nanomachine swarm. Escape pods were launching, but even those were being targeted by the human ship's point defense systems. Commander Krexval stood in his ruined bridge, watching his empire's greatest weapon fall apart around him. Sparks flew from damaged consoles. The artificial gravity was failing, leaving him floating. Half his crew was dead or evacuated. How? He asked the empty air. We are the Thrakari. We have conquered 50 systems. We have the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. His communications officer, one of the few still at his post, looked up. Sir, the human captain is hailing us. Put it through, Krexaval said quietly. Chen's voice came through, still distorted by the fluid she was breathing. You have 10 minutes to order your fleet to stand down and allow civilian evacuation. This is your final warning. You destroyed my dreadnought with a single small ship, Krexaval said. What are you? We're human, Chen replied. We come from a world where everything tries to kill us. So we learn to kill it first. We don't have the best technology. We just have technology that works when everything goes wrong. Your shields are pretty, but a fast enough rock will still break them. Your beam weapons are elegant, but they can't stop a nuclear explosion. You fight with honor and rules. We fight to win. This isn't over, Krexaval snarled. I have 200 ships. Actually, Chen said, and even through the fluid, Krexaval could hear her smile. You have about 180 ships. You should check your sensors. Krexaval looked at his tactical display. 20 Thrakari ships on the fleet's edge had gone dark. As he watched, another one disappeared from the screen. What did you do? Oh, those aren't us, Chen said. Those are our friends. They should be arriving right about now. Space behind the Thrakari fleet erupted with new contacts. 12 more human ships emerged from hyperspace. But these weren't warships. They were cargo haulers, mining vessels, one that looked like it might be a hospital ship. They were even uglier than the Perseverance, covered in improvised weapons and armor that looked like it had been welded on in a hurry. The lead ship broadcasted on all channels. This is Captain Rodriguez of the merchant vessel Fuck Around and Find Out. We heard someone was messing with our customers. That's bad for business. The galaxy was about to learn another lesson about humanity. They didn't just fight when threatened. They fought when their friends were threatened. They fought when innocent people were threatened. Captain Rodriguez of the Fuck Around and Find Out had been hauling cargo between systems for 15 years. His ship was a Frankenstein monster of parts bought, borrowed, and stolen from a dozen different species. The hull was human, built in the shipyards of Mars. The engines were Altarian, bought secondhand and held together with prayer. The life support was Kepler, because humans could breathe almost anything if they tried hard enough. 3 days ago, he'd received a message from Captain Chen. The Thrakari were blocking trade routes and killing civilians. Bad for business. Very bad for business, so Rodriguez had made some calls. Listen up, you Thrakari bastards, Rodriguez broadcasted. You've been messing with free trade. That makes this personal. The human merchant fleet spread out in a formation that made no tactical sense. There was no organization, no clear command structure. It looked like a bunch of drunks had decided to play soldier. The Thrakari commanders actually laughed. They stopped laughing when the mining vessel Rockbreaker opened fire. Mining lasers weren't weapons. They were tools designed to cut through asteroids to slice metal-rich rocks into manageable chunks. They were slow, inefficient, and power-hungry. But Captain Thompson of the Rockbreaker had figured something out. If you overcharged them by 300% and didn't care about burning out the focusing arrays after one shot, they became something else entirely. The beam that struck the Thrakari cruiser, Pride of Thrakar, wasn't the elegant purple of military weapons. It was dirty orange, flickering and unstable. It cut through the cruiser's shields like they were tissue paper and kept going, slicing the ship cleanly in half. Holy shit, Thompson. Rodriguez laughed over the comm. Save some for the rest of us. The cargo hauler, box full of rocks, had taken a different approach. Captain Petrov had filled her cargo bays with actual rocks. Asteroids, chunks, mining debris, anything with mass. She was using her cargo handling system, designed to gently move containers in zero gravity. As the galaxy's largest mass driver, rocks the size of houses flew at Thrakari ships at speeds that cargo systems should never achieve. The hospital ship Florence looked like it wasn't even armed. It still had the white and red medical markings. It was broadcasting its medical ship transponder codes. By all laws of war, it should have been left alone. But Dr. Captain Sarah Washington had modified the medical scanners. Medical scanners used focused electromagnetic pulses to see inside bodies without cutting them open. They were precision instruments, carefully calibrated to never harm living tissue. Washington had removed all the safety limiters. The EMP burst that erupted from the Florence was specifically tuned to Thrakari technology. Washington had spent 3 hours analyzing the Thrakari ship signatures, finding their exact electromagnetic frequency. The pulse washed over 6 Thrakari vessels and their systems just stopped. Lights went out. Engines died. Weapons went silent. "That's for the civilians you killed," Washington said calmly as if she was discussing a medical procedure. "Don't worry. Your life support will come back online in about an hour. Maybe." The Thrakari fleet tried to respond with coordinated tactics, but the human merchants weren't fighting like a military force. They were fighting like a bar brawl in space. There was no pattern to predict, no strategy to counter. One moment a cargo ship was running away. The next it had dumped its entire cargo of industrial acids into space, creating a cloud that ate through hull plating. The yacht party time, someone's personal pleasure craft that had joined the fight for reasons unknown, was somehow broadcasting music at volumes that overloaded Thrakari communication systems. The captain, who appeared to be drunk during the battle, had strapped speakers to the outside of his ship. The bass was so intense it was creating resonance failures in nearby Thrakari hull plating. Is that human music?" a Thrakari officer asked in horror as his console cracked from the vibrations. "I think it's something called death metal," his commander shouted over the noise. Meanwhile, the Perseverance had finally slowed from its 15 gravity burn. The crew was draining the fluid from their lungs, coughing and gasping as they returned to breathing air. It was painful. Several crew members were vomiting, but they were all alive and ready to continue fighting. "Status report," Chen ordered, her voice hoarse. "Nanomachine swarm has consumed 40% of the dreadnought. 60 Thrakari vessels destroyed or disabled. The merchants are, well, they're doing whatever it is they're doing, and it seems to be working." Chen watched the tactical display. The fuck around and find out had just rammed a Thrakari destroyer. Not by accident, Rodriguez had reinforced his ship's nose with salvaged battleship armor and turned his cargo hauler into a battering ram. He was now backing up to do it again. "Humans are insane," someone in the council chambers whispered. "No," Ambassador Veltok corrected. "They're not insane. They're creative. Look at what they're doing. Every one of those ships is using its normal equipment in ways it was never designed for. They're not warriors. They're engineers and traders and doctors who decided to fight. And they're winning." The Thrakari fleet was in chaos. Ships were colliding with each other trying to avoid rocks, industrial lasers, and a hospital ship that kept hitting them with targeted EMP bursts. The organized battle lines had collapsed into dozens of individual fights, and in each one, the humans were doing something unexpected. The salvage ship Treasure Hunter had deployed its recovery drones, but instead of recovering debris, the drones were attaching to Thrakari ships and cutting pieces off. They were literally salvaging enemy vessels while they were still fighting. "Hey, this Thrakari armor is pretty good stuff," the Treasure Hunter's captain radioed. "Anyone want to buy some? I'm getting it cheap." Commander Krexval watched from his dying dreadnought. His empire's grand fleet was being destroyed by merchants and miners. His escape pod was ready, but he couldn't bring himself to leave. This wasn't how the strong were supposed to lose to the weak. "Sir," his last remaining officer said, "we should evacuate." "To where?" Krexval asked. "To return home in shame? Defeated by traitors?" A new voice came over the comm. It was Captain Chen again, now breathing air instead of fluid. "Commander Krexval, you've lost 120 ships. Your dreadnought is being eaten by nanomachines. Your fleet is in ruins, but you still have 80 ships and thousands of crew members who could live. Stand down. Let the civilians evacuate. Go home." "You don't understand," Krexval said. "We are Thrakari. We don't surrender." "Then you'll die for nothing," Chen said bluntly. "Your choice. But look at your tactical screen first." Krexval looked. More human ships were arriving. Not warships or merchants. These were passenger liners, freight runners, even what looked like a colony ship. They were all heading for the planet, ignoring the battle, their cargo bays open. "What are they doing?" "Their job," Chen said. "They're evacuating the civilians you've been bombing for 3 months. The people you came here to conquer. While we're fighting you, they're saving lives. That's what this was all about. We didn't come here to destroy you. We came here to save them." On the planet's surface, human ships were landing in cities and refugee camps anywhere people were gathered. They weren't checking species. They weren't asking for payment. They were just loading everyone who wanted to leave. A small Kalari child, her blue fur matted with dust, was carried aboard a human freighter by her mother. The human crew member who helped them aboard was still wearing his pajamas under his emergency suit. He'd been sleeping when the call came to help with the evacuation. "Where are we going?" the mother asked. "Anywhere safe," the human replied. "We'll figure out the details later. Right now, we just need to get you out." Back in space, the battle was winding down. The Thrakari ships were pulling back, no longer firing. They'd lost too much, and their commander wasn't responding to calls. The human merchants were letting them go, though several were following at a distance, just to make sure they actually leave, as Rodriguez put it. The Florence had switched from weapons to its actual purpose. Medical shuttles were launching, heading for damaged ships from both sides. Dr. Washington was treating wounded Thrakari with the same professionalism she showed everyone else. "Why?" a wounded Thrakari warrior asked her. "We tried to kill you." "You failed," Washington said simply, injecting him with pain medication. "And I'm a doctor. Healing is what I do when I'm not turning medical equipment into weapons." The evacuation continued. In 6 hours, the human fleet had rescued 3 million civilians from the planet. Different species, different governments, all united by the fact that humans had decided they needed help. Captain Chen stood on her bridge, watching the evacuation ships leave one by one. Her crew was exhausted. The Perseverance had taken damage that would need months to properly repair. But they'd done what they came to do. "Captain," her communications officer said, "we're receiving a transmission from the Council. Put it through." Ambassador Veltok appeared on the screen, his 4 eyes wide. "Captain Chen, the Galactic Council wishes to thank humanity for your intervention. But we must ask how. Your technology is centuries behind the Thrakari. Your ships are held together with improvisation." "You shouldn't have won," Chen smiled tiredly. "Ambassador, we don't have the best technology." The battlefield was quiet now. Where once 10,000 missiles had filled space with fire, now there was only debris and the gentle pulse of rescue beacons. The mighty Thrakari dreadnought floated dead in space, half-eaten by nanomachines that had finally been deactivated. 60 Thrakari ships drifted as tombs. Others limped away toward the system's edge, their proud formations broken. And in the middle of it all, human ships moved with purpose. Not the purpose of war, but of something else. Something the galaxy had rarely seen after battles like this. The Florence had deployed every medical shuttle it had. Dr. Washington worked without rest, moving from patient to patient. Thrakari warriors lay next to Alliance defenders, all receiving the same treatment. She didn't see enemies or allies. She saw patients. "Doctor," one of her nurses said, "we're running low on supplies." "Then we make do with what we have," Washington replied, not looking up from the Thrakari warrior she was treating. His forearms were badly burned, his scales cracked from explosive decompression. "Johnson, start synthesizing more antibiotics. Use the coffee maker if you have to." "The coffee maker? It's basically a chemical processor." "Make it work." The cargo ships had transformed again. No longer weapons, they were rescue vessels. The box full of rocks had dumped its remaining stones, and was now carefully collecting escape pods with the same system Petrov had used to throw asteroids. The rockbreaker was using its mining lasers at minimal power to cut trapped crew members out of damaged sections of ships. Captain Rodriguez of the fuck around, and find out was personally leading a boarding team onto a Thrakari destroyer, not to fight but to rescue. The ship's reactor was failing, radiation flooding its corridors. The Thrakari crew had given up trying to fix it and were waiting to die. "Not on my watch," Rodriguez muttered, his radiation counter screaming warnings. He kicked open a door to find 12 Thrakari warriors huddled in a corner, their scales pale with radiation sickness. "Come on," he said, gesturing with his plasma cutter. "We're leaving." "Why?" one of them asked. "We're enemies." "We're enemies," Rodriguez corrected. "Fight's over. Now you're just people who need help. Can you walk?" The evacuation from the planet was complete. 3 million civilians of 40 different species were now aboard human ships, heading for safe systems. The colony ship New Horizons had taken on so many refugees that its captain had to shut down non-essential systems just to maintain life support. "We're at 300% capacity," the life support officer reported. "Then we make it work," the captain replied. "Shut down my cabin's heating. Route that power to Deck 7. "Sir, regulations say." "Regulations were written by people who weren't here." "We are. Make it work." In the council chambers, Ambassador Veltok watched the feeds from 100 different sources. The human ships were everywhere, doing everything. They were recovering bodies for proper burial. They were distributing emergency supplies. They were even repairing damaged Thrakari ships just enough to make sure they could make it home. I don't understand, his aide said. They were just killing each other. Now the humans are saving their enemies? That's what makes them dangerous, Veltok realized. Not their weapons or their insanity. It's this. They can switch from destroyer to savior in seconds. They fight without mercy, then save without prejudice. Commander Krexval floated in his escape pod, watching the human salvage ship approaching. He expected to be taken prisoner, interrogated, maybe executed. That's what the Thrakari would do. Instead, the first human to reach him was a medic who immediately started checking his injuries. You have a concussion, the medic said. Maybe some internal bleeding. We need to get you to surgery. I don't understand, Krexval said. We tried to destroy you. Yeah, and you failed, the medic replied, injecting him with something for the pain. Now shut up and let me save your life. Captain Chen stood on the bridge of the Perseverance reading damage reports. They'd need months of repairs. Half their weapons were destroyed. The nanomachine pods were gone, used up in the battle. The fluid breathing system had traumatized half her crew. But they were alive. Captain, Lieutenant Kim said, we're receiving a priority message from Earth Command. Put it through. Admiral Peters appeared on the screen. He was an old man, scarred from a dozen battles, missing an eye from a pirate raid 20 years ago. Captain Chen, I've reviewed your battle footage. You deployed self-replicating weapons. Yes. Sir, those are banned by treaty. Yes. Sir, you turned your crew into fluid breathers to achieve impossible accelerations. Yes. Sir, you used civilian vessels as weapons platforms. Yes, sir. Peters leaned forward. Outstanding work, Captain. The treaty says we can't use those weapons. It doesn't say we can't have them. And sometimes to save 3 million civilians, you need to break some rules. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. The Council wants a full report. They want to know how one human warship and a bunch of merchants defeated the Thrakari Empire's Grand Fleet. What do I tell them? Chen thought for a moment. Tell them the truth, sir. We're human. We don't fight fair. We fight to win. And when the fighting's over, we fix what we broke. The recovery operations continued for 3 more days. Every survivor found, every body recovered, every ship that could be saved was saved. The human merchants worked alongside the military vessel. No distinction between them now. They were all just humans doing what humans did. On the 3rd day, a Galactic Council fleet arrived. 50 of the most advanced warships in known space come to enforce peace. They found it already there. Admiral Thexval of the Council fleet looked at the scene before him. Human ships were everywhere, ugly and patched and bleeding radiation from damaged cores. They should have been limping home. Instead, they were towing Thrakari vessels to safety, treating wounded, distributing supplies. Ambassador Veltok, the Admiral said over comm, I need you to explain what I'm seeing. You're seeing humans, Admiral, Veltok replied. They just fought the most chaotic, rule-breaking, insane battle in galactic history. And now they're cleaning up, not their mess. Everyone's mess, but why? Veltok thought about it. He'd been watching the humans for 3 days trying to understand. Because to them the battle was just a job, something that needed doing. But this, the saving and healing and helping, this is who they are. Captain Chen received one final message from Commander Krexval before the Thrakari departed. The commander was in a human medical bay. His wounds treated, his warriors saved. Captain Chen, Krexval said, his voice different now, lacking the arrogance from before. I have a question. Ask. You could have destroyed us all. Your weapons, your tactics, they were beyond anything we prepared for. Why did you stop? Chen looked tired. She'd been awake for 72 hours, coordinating rescue efforts. Because winning isn't about destroying your enemy, Commander. It's about achieving your objective. Our objective was to save civilians. We did that. Destroying you would have just been killing for the sake of killing. The Thrakari would have destroyed you. Probably, Chen agreed. But we're not Thrakari. We're human. We kill when we have to, save when we can, and fix what we break. It's messy and contradictory, and it doesn't make sense. But it works. Krexval was quiet for a moment. The galaxy fears the wrong thing about you. Oh? They fear your weapons, your willingness to break rules. But that's not what makes you dangerous. What does? You care, Krexval said simply. You care about people you've never met, species you've never seen. You'll fight impossible battles for strangers. You'll save your enemies. You'll share your food with refugees even when you're hungry. That caring makes you do things no rational species would do. It makes you unpredictable, unstoppable. The connection ended. The Thrakari fleet, what remained of it, jumped to hyperspace. They would return home with stories of humans who fought like demons and healed like angels. Stories that would spread through the galaxy faster than light. The human fleet began its own journey home. The Perseverance led the way, battered but proud. Behind it came the merchants, each one now bearing scars from battle. The evacuation ships followed, packed with refugees who would need new homes. In his final report to the Galactic Council, Ambassador Veltok wrote, "Humanity's entry into this conflict has shown us something we didn't expect. They don't have the strongest shields or the biggest ships or the most advanced technology. What they have is adaptability, determination, and a peculiar inability to accept defeat. They fight with primitive weapons pushed to impossible extremes. They turn medical equipment into weapons and weapons into rescue tools. They break every rule of warfare, then heal their enemies when the battle ends. The Thrakari asked for war. The humans gave them humanity. And perhaps that's the most terrifying weapon of all. The galaxy had learned its lesson. When humans entered a combat zone, they didn't just bring weapons. They brought their whole species' stubborn refusal to lose, their insane creativity, and their inexplicable compassion. They brought humanity. And that, it turned out, was enough to change everything. The war was over. The civilians were saved. The enemy was defeated but not destroyed. Just another day for the human fleet.